We are talking a little bit about the Megan Boswell trial and everything that we've seen. I know a lot of you followed along with me during the trial. Some of you didn't want to because it was pretty horrific and it involves a baby. But let's recap and then we're going to talk about why I'm doing the live. So, Megan Boswell was 18 when her daughter went missing, and the baby had been seen for 3 months. And it was actually Megan's dad, so the baby, it was her grandpa. And he called the police and said, Look, my daughter has a baby, Evelyn, and she's been missing, and I'm starting to get very concerned. Something's just not adding up, something's not right. And they began their search. They would eventually find baby Evelyn. She had foil wrapped around her head, as well as a blanket wrapped around her head over the foil. Pretty horrible. And then she put her in a plastic trash can and ended up planting her on her dad's property in an old playhouse that was hers. So obviously horrible. I think the grandpa was devastated being the one to have her, and he didn't even know that she was on site. Obviously all pretty upsetting. She would later be arrested. She told the police 11 different stories. We got to see different interviews or interrogations. And there was one of them that we saw during the trial that she had probably about an hour sit down with two police officers. She left that interview and was standing outside and started talking to a different police officer who was like, let me interview her because she's just talking, saying all this stuff that's going on. And so he asked her if she wanted to come in for an interview, and she said yes. And she gave a completely different story than what she had literally just gotten done saying to the two other officers. You can't make it up with her. So yeah, like I said, she was 18 at the time. She is now 23. She turns 24 in March. But she had her trial. There were 17 charges, and she was found guilty on all of them. And one of the big topics that we kept talking about in the chat is how surprised we were that they didn't put on the death penalty. They only wanted to do life in prison. They didn't add it. And we were wondering if it's because of her age at the time. But then I was digging into Tennessee's laws on that, and it said you have to be at least 18. So she qualified for it, and the prosecutors decided not to go for it. Always interesting. We don't have a reason yet as to why they did that. I'm going to go ahead and move myself to the corner. But one of the defense attorneys, or I'm sorry, no, it's one of the prosecutors, came on and did a little bit of an interview with Court TV. So I thought we could watch it, and maybe that will give us some more answers. Maybe not, but let's see what they have to say. I'm pausing because I see that the video is paused on here. So let me see if I need to fix something. Let me just add it again so it doesn't have any more issues. Okay, much better.
Room into the courtroom with all of the interviews. I would imagine it would be hard to even keep track of how many people she talked to, who she talked to make sure you're not leaving anything out there that could be used against her. How did you go about that process? Did you have investigators assist you with gathering the media evidence?
We did. It was a process. We actually had to use an outside organization to help us kind of organize it. We're not a huge office by any means, and obviously we have lots of cases we have to prosecute. So we had to kind of use all the resources and then some even outside of our office to be able to put all that together.
I'm sure it's no easy feat, certainly a case like this, and you know, so many eyes on it, William, a case that you might see on any given day have a case of this nature, but this one, people around the world heard about it and were hoping for justice for baby Evelyn. What was it like going through that process? And it was a long one. I mean, we think back to 2020. What was it like all these months? Would you kind of take us behind the scenes and tell us about everything that went into getting to the point of the trial?
Keep in mind, this was 5 years after the fact. Well, almost 5 years. It took forever to get to this date and the trial to happen.
It was a long process, and you know, as things unfolded, it was really kind of bizarre. You know, really, I mean, we knew something was odd, something was off, but you know, Megan was such a skilled manipulator, and her lies just led everyone off. So it was very, very, very difficult to get everything together and try to put everything together in a way that was, you know, that led to ultimately what was going to uncover the case. You know, people wondered why it took so long. It was because you know, Megan's lies were so skilled. I mean, she was, you know, I called her a master manipulator during arguments, and she truly was, even at 18 years old. The stories she told, I mean, they knew they weren't true, but you know, being able to peel back those layers and find out what the actual truth was very, very difficult. And, you know, ultimately, if her dad, Tommy Boswell, had not come forward, you know, I don't know that we'd be here even today, 5 years later. You know, I think Evelyn would still be in that trash can, and nobody would be any wiser.
Wow, William, that's chilling and so heartbreaking to hear, as you know.
So when I was describing this entire trial and everything leading up to it, I was talking with my husband, and I said that if it wasn't for that grandpa, Tommy Boswell, nobody would have ever done anything to find Evelyn. No one. Her mom was heavily into drugs, and it seems like who they thought was the father, Ethan Perry, sounds like he might not be. We haven't had that 100% confirmed, but it sounds like we don't know who the dad was. But yeah, it sounds like nobody would have done anything. And it was because that grandpa loved his granddaughter so much that after 3 months, he couldn't take it anymore and had to blow the whistle, get the police involved. And it had to be, I said it then, I'm going to re-say it, but it had to be heartbreaking for him, who was the one who really brought attention to this entire case and Evelyn missing. And then Megan had planted the body on his property. I'm sure he was beyond devastated.
Your rebuttal was excellent. We have a clip from it. Let's play it now.
This case is the very opposite of an accident. It was an intentional and knowing murder of a child. Megan Boswell got rid of Evelyn so that Megan could do Megan. And she enjoyed it. You've seen the picturs. General Massengill showed you. Hanging out on Blowing Rock, going to the aquarium, Super Bowl party. Megan Boswell sits here in this courtroom today as guilty as she was back in that first week in December.
You know, William, we get to see, you know, how confident you are. What a great litigator. Obviously, you're a very seasoned prosecutor. And when we think of everything that goes into it, our viewers get to see, you know, the finished product, right? They get to see you in action at trial. I'm curious, you know, when you're at home, is this a case that you lose sleep over? Is this a case that you can't stop thinking about those pictures of little Evelyn?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll never have those pictures out of my mind. I mean, General Massengill and I have lived this case day in and day out for literally probably the last 2 months. I mean, there's, I don't know that I've had a day off in the last 2 months, you know, and certainly the last 2 weeks have been just very intense and very emotional.
I'm sure. You know, I always say this, I'm not just saying this because you're here with me now, William, but I always say the people who do this for a living are special people, you know, because somebody's got to do this job, look at those photos, go through the evidence, try the case, you know, on behalf of that child, that precious victim who is loved and deeply missed. Tell me, William, many of us, myself included, watching this case, you know, as it was just progressing through the system over the last couple of years, thought that it may not go to trial, thought that there may be some type of a plea agreement reached. Would you speak to that? Was there any offer made to Megan Boswell ahead of trial?
Well, there were certainly negotiations. I think at some point we thought we were probably close. But ultimately, we didn't get there. There was a lot of discussion about that because obviously there was a lot of outrage in the community. There was a lot of people who probably thought we should have sought even more punishment than what we did. But, you know, as prosecutors, at the end of the day, you have to do what you think is right and what you think is appropriate. And, you know, we had those discussions and I think we landed at the proper place.
Would you tell us a little bit about?
So that kind of addresses what I was saying, that a lot of us were wondering is why did they not do the death penalty? That just him saying that they were doing at the end of the day what they thought was the right thing. So, I mean, at least that's not a legal reason of that they couldn't do it. They could have, but they decided not to. Very interesting.
That, please, William. Is Tennessee a state where the death penalty is a possibility in a case like this?
It is. However, you know, there's case law out there that basically says, you know, if you've got a young defendant like Megan was, 18 years old, that essentially it's a disproportionate penalty to impose the death penalty. And ultimately, that's why we decided to just seek life without parole.
Understood. Would your office have been okay with a plea to manslaughter with a significant amount of prison time?
Manslaughter is probably a little low. That probably wouldn't have brought enough time there. Certainly, you know, we needed to send a message in the community. I don't think would have accepted that as a proper plea in this case.
Sure. Would you tell us what specifically the office would have been okay with that she, I'm assuming, rejected?
Well, I mean, a substantial amount of time, you know, something less than life, but something certainly very close to that.
Mm-hmm. With a plea to murder, and she was unwilling to do that. Understood. William, is there anything else you can tell us about Megan Boswell, something that you and your colleagues knew about her or about this case that you just weren't allowed to introduce at trial?
I don't know. I think If you saw those interviews that we introduced in trial, that pretty much distills Megan for who she was. I mean, we talked to a number of people who were also friends of hers, people that she had contact with, other family members, and that pretty much is who Megan is. I mean, she was all about Megan, and she would use anyone and everyone to her benefit. I mean, that is, I'm sure there may have been another side to her, but in conversations that we had with folks, that is ultimately where everyone ended up, which was just another person that was caught up in Megan's web of manipulation, which is sad.
It really is. She's a master manipulator, a dangerous person. She's going to wind up exactly where she belongs, behind bars. And William, let me end with a compliment. As we were waiting for the verdict to be read, we could see you and one of Megan's attorneys being very cordial with each other. And I was saying to my analyst guest on the air how wonderful that is to see advocates who are adversaries in the courtroom going at it at trial, but being so professional and so civilized. And we were talking about how oftentimes you get to know the same people in the courthouse where you practice when you do criminal work, and you may find yourself at lunch with someone, one afternoon, and then the next morning picking a jury on opposite sides of counsel table. Did you know these lawyers? Had you had cases with them, or are you friendly with them within the local bar?
Oh, yes. Mr. Scott and I have tried many, many cases over the years, and, he is a very good defense attorney, and we go at it hard in the courtroom, which is what you're supposed to do. But at the end of the day, again, we're a small community here, and we can shake hands and go eat lunch and disagree about what took place in the courtroom. So I think that's the way it's supposed to work.
It sure is. You're embodying what the rules of professional responsibility are all about, that civility. So you both set a great example, and I'm sure didn't even know that you did it, but our cameras were rolling and we saw it, and we loved seeing your advocacy throughout the trial. It was tremendous. Congratulations again, and you really proved to everyone watching around the world that baby Evelyn mattered. Deputy District Attorney William Harper, thank you so much for the interview and for your time.
Thank you.
All right. So that was a good way to end it. I thought that they did do a good job, both sides. And something that they did in this trial that I was going to talk about during the trial, and then I just didn't, so I'm going to say it now. But every time that the state would bring a witness, they would always end their questioning with, please answer any questions that the defense might have for you. And I just thought that was so nice. I haven't seen any other trial do that, but I think it's good that they really were cordial to each other and very professional, and it just makes everything run smoother. I agree, Megan just blamed every single person other than herself, and it's really remarkable how many lies she told to different people, and it was always about someone else did this. It was someone else's problem that did this. And one of the last ones that she used was her mom, and I feel like that's the lowest of lows, but her mom was a heavy drug addict, major legal problems for years, and to use her mom to make it seem believable, I thought was she just was taking advantage of her mom being in an awful situation. And, not that her mom's a great person or, deserves not to be viewed a certain way. People can do that. But I just felt like it was so manipulative knowing that she had a drug problem, so she was trying to pin it on that because that sounded more believable. I didn't like it at all. So Megan did not speak. She chose to remain silent, and obviously that's her choice. But with sentencing, and we were talking about it a little bit in the chat, but May 22nd is her sentencing, and yeah, it's pretty drawn out and far away from now, but that happens all the time. But I'm really hoping with that, Megan actually says something. I feel like it's a horrific scenario, and she tried to blame it on so many people that I would hope she would utilize that time to say sorry and say certain things, but we'll see. She's 23 right now, turning 24 in March. So she's still a bit young, so I don't know if she'll actually be able to process that she should say something, apologize to all the family and friends that loved Evelyn. We'll see. We will see. So I will be back on later today. There was a breakdown of a trial that we had just started, the Rose Petal murder trial, and I thought that might help all of us understand a bit more, because there's two different lawsuits going on, and it involves so many people and moving parts, and so hopefully they can do a good job of breaking it down. So if anyone's missed any days with us and hasn't seen it, you'll catch up right away and understand what's going on. So we will be back for that probably in a few hours, and anything else that I can find. But I'm glad that we watched this. Like I said, they basically gave us the answer that they could have gone for the death penalty, and they chose not to. So that lets us know that we were on the right track, because they felt like they needed to even ask the prosecutor, like, hey, you didn't do this. So we're doing good. All right. If you're on later, I will see you then. And if not, thank you for watching.